Today we're taking a first look at the new Diamondback Sync'r Carbon 29er. On the box it says Ready Ride, and what I think they're going for is a bike out of the box that you can put together pretty easily without needing a shop if you have some sort of mechanical aptitude. Last year I rode the 27.5 version of this and I ended up loving it. I was really surprised. This year they've released a 29er version, so I'm excited to try that out to see if it still retains that fun, exciting nature that the older one had, or if it changed in a different way. Looking at the geo charts, I still see a really short reach and some things that are considered a little bit outdated compared to some of the newer bikes. That's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people aren't gelling with the really new aggressive long bikes. I personally love them, but most places in the world don't have trails steep enough or aggressive enough to warrant that type of bike. So this could be a better fit for a lot of people. We'll find out in the ride review. Today we're just going to take a first look at it and I'll go through the components and geometry and what I like and what I don't like about it on the stand. I don't have any bike sponsors on this channel. Diamondback did not pay me to review this. I'm not making money from Diamondback to review it. If I'm lucky, I'll make 20 bucks on all the views that this video makes. And the hours that will go into this and the editing and the filming and the publishing and the promoting, it's really not worth it just based on YouTube revenue alone. And the way that I make my money and get paid for my work is through Patreon, through bike consultations. I have patrons who just donate every month just to support the channel to see it succeed in the future. And I have other patrons who need help finding the right bike for them. And they're having a tough time deciding between 2 or 3 bikes. So they hit me up and they say, hey, I need help. We go through a consultation process. We email back and forth many, many times and we narrow down their list. That way they don't end up paying a whole bunch of money for either a bike that doesn't suit them well or a bike that was totally overpriced to begin with. So if you're interested in that, I'm gonna put a little plug in that because that is how I support this channel. Watch all the other big YouTubers and they have bike sponsors. And if I had a bike sponsor, I wouldn't be able to be impartial in these reviews. It would always come into play. So I choose to remain unsponsored on the bike side of things. I've got some sponsors like Orange Seal and 9.8 and people that help me with the components to be able to buy the things that I need to review these. But I don't have any bike sponsors intentionally, and because of that, I make less money. So if you like the channel, if you've learned a lot, think about how much that might be worth to you and consider becoming a patron to help support this further. All right, enough about that. Let's get these bubble wraps off. There's a lot of packaging material on here. Almost seems like Diamondback's going for a direct-to-consumer feel with this, or they're trying to not burden their shops by having it pretty much ready to go, because they've done a lot, like even wiring the dropper. Most companies don't do that, and I have to connect the dropper and fish the cable and all that. This comes pretty ready to go out of the box. All right, I've stripped off all the packaging materials, and it's clear to me that Diamondback is trying to make this easy for people who have never built up a bike before. We've got little hints here, like which direction to turn the pedals and the crank. Ironically, the other side doesn't have one, which is the backwards way to thread it in. I would think if they put it anywhere, they'd put it on the other side. We've also got a little indicator up here for which direction the fork goes. So yeah, they're definitely intending this to be built up by people who may not have a whole lot of experience building bikes. So this bike comes tubeless ready, but it comes with tubes in it, like a lot of bikes these days. So you're gonna need to pull the tube out, swap the valve, add sealant, and air it up. But that's pretty par for the course. I recommend running tubeless on all modern mountain bikes. It allows you to run lower tire pressure. It has a different feel on the tire, and it's always self-sealing, and it saves the weight of the tube. And when you've got big, heavy exo tires like these Minion DHR2s and a DHF, losing the weight of a tube will make a significant difference. If you just hate tubeless and you want to run tubes, more power to you. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm surprised how many people I run into that are still afraid of tubeless and worried about it. Tubeless has gotten so good these days that I think there's no reason not to run it. The rim is very tight. That's going to be a struggle for a lot of new riders, just to break the bead. It's been a while since it's been that tough. So yeah, I pull the tube out. I save this and put it in my pack if I have a massive gash on this and need to repair it mid-trail. This is a heavy tube too, so that is going to be a noticeable difference. And tires and wheels are the place you notice weight differences the most. In the goodies box, it comes with some good pedals. These are solid pedals. You never see that on a bike. A fender for the fork, a set of Allen keys, and a pedal wrench. Pretty cool. What it doesn't come with are tubeless valves, unfortunately, and I think that's even more important for a rider like me. Now I have to run down to the shop and buy valve stems to convert this to tubeless. I wish they would have thrown that in. That would have been a really nice touch. So I'll go get that. At least the rims are taped up and ready to go tubeless, but I've got to put my valve stem in here, put sealant in, air it up, and then it'll be good to go tubeless. So one company that is a sponsor of this channel and makes it possible is Orange Seal. I use their endurance sealant. I've been using it for years, long before they were a sponsor. I'm a huge fan of this stuff. It seals up plugs really well and it goes a long time without drying out, which is important for me in the desert in Arizona. I don't want to be topping off my sealant every 2 months. So I love this stuff. I've got the valve in. These are deep rims, so I would recommend a longer valve stem than normal, just so you got a little more room there. And it was interesting, the front tire came with super wide tube and the rear tire came with a narrow tube. Kind of interesting, I'd expect they'd be the same. And I weighed the tubes and it came into 1.25 pounds. So we are saving a significant amount of weight here by going tubeless, and we're gaining a better ride feel. This front DHF is snug to the rim. The DHR2 on the back wasn't. It was easy to break the bead, but man, this front one, I don't know if it was a manufacturing problem. I know Max has had a couple problems recently about making the beads too tight to the rim. Well, it's gonna seat up with a hand pump, no problem with how tight that is. All right, just for fun, I'm gonna try building it up with the tools they provided. These hex keys or Allens will come off of their little holder, so you can use it more like a screwdriver and spin it around this way. I think for those that subscribe to Lee McCormack's Rad Sizing Guide, I think you're gonna like this bike. Lee McCormack, who I respect greatly, he's a fantastic rider and an incredible coach. I don't wanna create drama, but his rad sizing doesn't quite work for me and it's leaving out some other important factors, and I'm not gonna discuss that in the comments below. I've talked about it with a few patrons and I'll talk about it later, but I feel like this bike's gonna be too short. This says medium for people 5'7" to 5'10", but I think the reach on this is gonna be real short for someone 5'10". And I do think the rad sizing makes sense for pump tracks and skills parks and stuff like that where he mainly coaches. So if you're learning to manual or bunny hop, you know, rad will help you out. If you're riding steep stuff like Sedona, I think it's gonna feel too short and I think it's gonna eject you over the cockpit more. Personally, that's my philosophy. So not trying to stir up trouble here. I just don't buy into the rad number as being the magic way to find out sizing, but it is a good thing to learn about and it might work for you. All right, so yeah, this is gonna be short. Seat tube's longer than it should be already. I can see that. This should be lower, but I say that about just about every bike. Despite this model only being on the market for a short time, it doesn't quite feel as modern on paper as some of the other bikes. That said, the last one I rode, the 27.5, was kind of short in the cockpit, but it worked with the bike. It was fun. If you've seen at least one of my videos, you've heard me talk about geometry. It seems like I can't escape talking about geometry in a single video because it is so important. And one thing we don't talk a lot about is the geometry between sizes. Most bikes have the same rear center for a small, medium, large, and extra large, and extra, extra large. And we just changed the front. That completely changes how a bike rides. And so this bike may ride great in a size XL, but it may feel weird in a size small. I believe, from my experience riding a lot of different bikes, when the reach is shorter than the rear center, the bike feels weird. And the back end feels longer than the front end. So I don't mind a short reach if the chain stays short too. But if the reach is short and the chain stays long, it just feels like you're riding an old Specialized or Trek where the front was really short and the back end was way out there, and it just feels awkward. So we'll see how this rides. On paper, they're pretty close, the reach and the chainstay. For reference, on my ideal bikes, I ride a 450 reach with like a 415 to 420 chainstay is my ideal. So just think of where would you want your bottom bracket to be in relationship to the two wheels. Would you rather have it forward quite a bit or backward quite a bit? Because those numbers will help you see where it is proportionally. On a large or extra large, it might make a lot of sense, and this bike may be better balanced or worse balanced. We'll see. All right, I like that the whole cockpit, the headset, the stem faceplate, and the stem that bolts onto the steer tube all use the same 4mm Allen. Love that. Another little tip. To get your bars centered, look over the top and line them up with the fork arch, not your tire, because the fork arch is straight. As always, when I get this on the ground and do my first ride around the parking lot, I'm going to be tweaking things. I'm going to be tweaking headset tightness. I'm going to be tweaking the bar roll. I'm going to be tweaking the stack height, all those little things. But just getting it going on the stand right here, we're going to set it up just so we can get shifting dialed in and stuff like that. Okay, I've hit a snag. The dropper clamp uses a 3mm hex, and that didn't come in my kit. So people aren't going to be able to attach this without buying another one. Whoops. So the install of the dropper lever, you're going to have to fiddle around with it until it looks normal. So install of this dropper lever is tricky. The cable's too long. You kind of need 3 hands to do this, and you need a tool that it didn't come with. I'm not a huge fan of this Brand X lever. That's going to be tricky for a novice mechanic. Oh boy, yeah. If you don't have mechanical aptitude, that is going to frustrate you and not really be possible. Plus, this only looks like a 125 dropper, which is a miss. All right, so it was a major battle getting the dropper lever on. I had to pull all the controls off, assemble it outside, and then slide it on, which scratched the bars up. Awful design by Brand X. That is the first thing I would change. I would upgrade to a wolf tooth or something that allows you to adjust it out here. Terrible design. Diamondback didn't even give you all the tools to install it, so people are going to be very frustrated with that. It'd be better if Diamondback didn't provide any tools than if they provided half the tools, in my mind. So either provide them all or don't. Also, I had to use a 2.5mm to get the grips off, which most people aren't going to have either unless they've been riding for a while. So a little bit frustrating there, a lot frustrating. And I've got a huge loop of housing out here. I've got an extra foot for my dropper. Now, I get it. Everyone's going to run a different dropper height, so we all need different length dropper cables. But if you're building this to be sold direct to consumer and you want to make their life easy, don't sell it with a dropper where all the adjustment is done inside the seat tube. That's beyond the ability of most riders. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to pull this all out, disconnect everything, trim the dropper, feed it back through, reconnect it, and then drop it in here and double check to make sure it's the right length, and probably do that 3 or 4 times till it's right. And that's just too much for most people. So that is a huge miss on that front. So if I were Diamondback, I'd spend another $40 to get a wolf tooth lever. There's nothing wrong with the X-Fusion Manic dropper. It's just the lever is not great. That bummed me out and that frustrated me a little bit. I'm going to go trim that and get that all dialed, and then we'll get some weights and talk final numbers on this thing. All right, we got it all built up. That was frustrating with that dropper lever. I haven't been that frustrated since the Carbon Chameleon build. Every now and then you just get frustrating builds and you just got to grit your teeth and get through it. Not the end of the world. I've done plenty of droppers, but through the eyes of someone new to the sport, just getting into it, that would be way beyond their abilities. All right, let's talk numbers and geos. This came in at 30 pounds even with their pedals, which is good. Like, most people think, well, that's Carbon. It should be like down to 24 pounds. This is not a Carbon XC race bike. It's not designed to be light. It's designed to be ridden hard. Let's talk numbers. This is a size 17, which they recommend for people 5'7" to 5'10". I'm 5'6", and I base my bikes off the reach measurement because I ride to go downhill, and that's where you feel the reach the most, is when you're standing up. The geo on this bike is a little off on paper, but we'll see how it is in person. So it has a 438mm reach, a 435mm chainstay. So they're almost exactly the same. At least it's not shorter. I'm okay with something down to like a 440 reach. It makes it playful, easier to throw around. We'll see how it feels. I feel like the chainstay's longer than it should be, but that's okay. What's the real bummer is it has a 435 seat tube length, which is really long in a medium, and it only comes with a 125mm dropper, and it comes with 175mm cranks. So if this had 170 mil cranks, you gain an extra 5 mil you could run on a dropper, and there's no need for the seat tube to be that big. They need to shorten that in future versions. The seat angle is 74 degrees, so I actually think this is gonna feel balanced with that shorter reach with the slacker seat angle. Those go well together. When you steepen the seat angle, you need a longer reach to fix your effective top tube in my mind. We have a 44 mil offset fork. Good job, Diamondback, speccing that with a low offset fork. That's gonna be really fun. It's got a Fox 34. This is a great trail fork. If you're a heavy rider over, say, 200 pounds, you're probably gonna feel the flex in a 34 with 140 mil travel, but I like this fork. It's a great hardtail fork. We've got a 160 rotor in the rear and a 180 in the front. I like seeing a bigger front rotor. I think 160 is a little weak for a bike spec'd with 2.4 DHRs on it. It's got a 66 degree head angle, which is right in there where I like it for my trail bikes, especially with the short offset fork. I think this is gonna feel good. Nice short stem, wide modern bar with a 35 mil clamp. This bike is spec'd quite well. It's the GX build, and it has a GX shifter. Not everybody does that on their GX build. They sneak an NX shifter in there sometimes and try to trick you because you won't notice. GX shifter, GX derailleur, and a GX cassette. And that's important because the GX cassette is an XD driver, and it's a lot lighter than the NX cassette. And we have NX cranks on it, so that's not GX. I'm okay with that. Our bottom bracket is an internal cartridge type. It's still a splined axle, but the bottom bracket bearings are inside the shell instead of outside. Those are a little bit weaker, but it's upgradable down the road. That's not a big deal at all. We've got 2 water bottle bolts on the seat tube, 3 on the top of the down tube. The carbon looks good, and I remember the 27.5 riding well. It was not overly stiff and didn't beat me up, so I have high hopes for this. I don't know much about the wheels. They feel heavy, especially with these tires. I'm glad we got those tubes out of there. I think Diamondback should have shipped this with valve stem. I love that it has an MRP chain guide and bash guard. It means this bike is meant to get rowdy. And I love the way SRAM GX Eagle shifts. I think it shifts wonderfully. I really like it. It feels precision, feels good on the stand. And this has 2 piston brakes. Everyone wants 4 piston brakes, and the really good 4 piston brakes are great. But I would be really careful about thinking all 4 piston brakes are better than all 2 piston brakes. Shimano knows that everyone's honed in on the fact that 4 piston brakes are stronger, so they've made some really inexpensive 4 piston brakes, and they're using the reputation of their nice stuff, hoping you'll buy those cheaper ones and think they're the same. They're not the same. Shimano's cheap, low-end 4 piston brakes, in my mind, are garbage. I do not like them, and I actually prefer these 2 piston brakes over them. These have a much better lever, they have a much better feel, and they have more power than even a 4 piston that's a low-end 4 piston. So I've got no issues with these brakes in the past. I don't think it's going to be a problem with this in the future. We do have those cheap stamped rotors, but I'm seeing those on just about every single bike these days. I like the chain stay protection. It looks like there's plenty of clearance in here for this 2.4. I don't know if you could fit a 2.6, probably not. So it's an interesting bike. I think it's well spec'd. At the time of this filming, this bike goes for $3,650. And you're getting a carbon frame with a GX build with a Fox 34 performance, name brand, almost everything, Maxxis tires. You've got a race face cockpit. There's a lot of good things going on here. But for $3,650, that's $50 more than a Yeti Arc C1. Now, if it rides better than Yeti, then it's totally worth it. But that puts it into perspective in the grand scheme of things. When it's more expensive than a Yeti, either Yeti's doing something really right and making some affordable bikes, or this is overpriced. But in the $3,600 price range, you are in the range where you could build up just about any frame you want within reason if you shop around and come out with a pretty comparable build. So you could get a frame from one of the smaller builders that has exactly what you want, throw on a fork you want, throw on a cheap drivetrain and a set of wheels that have higher engagement and things like that. And if you're smart, you could actually build something quite similar to my Banshee Paradox or my RSD Middle Child Tie. So that kind of puts it into perspective. I think it's a bit overpriced, but there are people out there who aren't going to want to shop for everything, who aren't going to know how to build it up themselves, and who are going to want a bike ready to go out of the box that they just put the bars on, and struggle with the dropper lever for an hour. But aside from that, I think this bike has a lot of potential and I can't wait to see how it rides. In the end, the numbers don't matter. What matters is how it rides. I really like the way the 27.5 bike rode, and I think I'm really gonna like the way that this bike rides as well. I'm excited to try it out. If you're excited to see it, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon so you're notified when the video drops. It's time to listen to that hub. Thanks for watching. There's a party in the mountains and you're invited.